There are some new concerns out of Russia this morning as well. A nuclear-capable Russian submarine said to carry a one-of-its-kind nuclear device has left its base near the Arctic Circle. And Nick Smith is here with us now to explain what's at stake. Nick.
Adrian, state officials continue to follow this story. An Italian newspaper says it got its hands on a NATO warning about the Belgorod. That's the submarine. Now, according to that note, NATO officials are worried Russia could be testing out a torpedo capable of carrying nuclear weapons. Russian officials say the sub has the ability to create a 1,600-foot nuclear tsunami that could drown coastal cities. Right now, there is no indication Russia is preparing for an explosive nuclear test, but according to that leaked NATO memo and analysis, Russia is most likely testing a torpedo that uses nuclear power. U.S. officials continue to warn Vladimir Putin and Russia of catastrophic consequences if it resorts to nuclear warfare. Last night, on the debut of Cuomo, former National Security Advisor John Bolton offered another way of deterrence.
What could you do other than an exchange of nuclear weapons, which nobody would want?
Well, I think we should say publicly that if Putin did authorize the use of a nuclear weapon, he would be signing his own suicide note. And I think that needs to be clear publicly so that everybody in the Russian military, intelligence, domestic security conglomerate knows how much is at risk here.
Russia's war in Ukraine and recent escalations have Americans stressed. This morning, our exclusive Decision Desk News Nation polling shows 39% of Americans think Russia is our biggest threat, followed by China and Iran. This morning, the Kremlin says it does not take part in Western nuclear rhetoric in response to a British report about an alleged nuclear weapons test on Ukraine's border. It's also important to stress that U.S. officials are monitoring the situation and say they have not seen Russia prepare any of its forces for a nuclear strike. Adrian?
All right, Nick, thank you very much for the updates. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find new...
Top-of-the-line Russian nuclear-powered submarine has gone missing from its harbor in the Arctic along with its doomsday weapon. NATO sent an intelligence note to its member countries warning of the mobilization of the Russian nuclear submarine Belgorod. NATO has warned members that Russia's Belgorod submarine no longer appear to be operating out of its White Sea base, where it has been active since July 2022. Officials warned that Russia may plan to test Belgorod's Poseidon weapon system, a drone equipped with a nuclear bomb that Russia has claimed is capable of creating a radioactive tsunami. The drone can be deployed from the submarine and detonated at a depth of 1 kilometer near a coastal city. Russian state media has claimed the device can create a 1,600th wave that smashes into the coast and irradiates it. The 600-feet submarine was delivered to the Russian Navy as part of Russian President Vladimir Putin's top-secret program that aims to develop and operate a series of a new class of superweapons. Analyst Rebecca Koffler said that Russia's use of such a weapon would only come as a last resort in the event that Russia and the U.S. are in a direct kinetic war and Russia is losing. Koffler said the device is likely not to be operational until 2027. But Putin may be testing it as a means to intimidate both Ukraine and its NATO allies in the West. Putin has warned that Russia's potential use of nuclear weapons is not a bluff. Belgorod's location remains publicly unknown, a situation that is not particularly surprising to Koffler. According to her, Russian submarines have some of the best stealth capabilities in the world and have even entered U.S. waters undetected in the past. Koffler said there have been times when Russian nuclear-powered attack submarines, armed with long-range cruise missiles, operated undetected for weeks close to U.S. shores. The nuclear torpedo was presented in 2018 by Russia as the way to ensure Russian military supremacy, although nuclear experts have argued that the same effect can be achieved with an intercontinental missile like those in operation since the 1960s. The United States has activated the satellite network to track torpedoes that takes advantage of the high heat given off by the projectiles when they are activated. But they are unable to detect them under the sea. The Belgorod is 184 meters long and 15 meters wide and can travel at about 60 kilometers per hour underwater. It is estimated that it can go up to 120 days without having to return to the surface. In September 2022, Russian nuclear-powered submarines fired cruise missiles in the Arctic, as part of military drills designed to test Moscow's readiness for a possible conflict in its icy northern waters. The drills, named UMCA 2022, took place in the Chukchi Sea, an eastern stretch of the Arctic Ocean that separates Russia from the U.S. state of Alaska. Russia sees its vast Arctic territory as a vital strategic interest and has been building up its military capabilities in the region for years, raising alarm bells in the West. In addition to the missile launches from nuclear-powered submarines, Russia's Bastion coastal missile system also fired missiles at sea-based targets at a distance of 300 kilometers from the Chukchi Peninsula. NATO officials said Russia's military buildup in the Arctic is an obvious strategic challenge for NATO. According to a report, 80% of Russia's natural gas and 17% of its oil production comes from the Arctic. Putin has said Arctic mineral reserves could be worth up to $30 trillion. The region as a whole is seen by observers as a future battleground for both military and economic competition between rival powers. Russia is amassing unprecedented military might in the Arctic and testing its newest weapons in a region freshly ice-free due to the climate emergency in a bid to secure its northern coast and open up a key shipping route from Asia to Europe. Additionally, Russia has deployed a new weapon named Sirkin, an anti-ship hypersonic cruise missile, and the Poseidon, a torpedo which Russians call a superweapon. The recent exercises were conducted near Alexandra Land, a large island among the Franz Joseph Land archipelago, where Russia recently constructed a military base. Countries with a stake in the polar region, including Russia, the US, Canada, Denmark, and Norway, are eager to assert their jurisdiction in the area as potential shipping lanes open because of melting ice caps. The head of Russian space agency Roscosmos has claimed his country could quickly destroy NATO countries if a nuclear war took place. Putin also said that Russia's intervention in Ukraine had been necessary because the West was preparing for the invasion of Russia. Dmitry Rogozin, who has made many outlandish and provocative comments in recent months, shared the message in Russian on his Telegram channel. Rogozin claimed that the destruction could happen in 30 minutes and said, "But we must not allow it, since the consequences of an exchange of nuclear strikes will affect the state of our Earth." Rogozin also wrote in his Telegram post, "NATO is waging war against us. It has not declared it, but it doesn't change anything. Now it's obvious to everyone." His comments do not align with the stance of NATO, which posted a statement on its website, saying that the organization condemns in the strongest possible terms Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which is an independent, peaceful, and democratic country, and a close NATO partner. It continued, "The alliance calls on President Putin to stop this war immediately, withdraw all his forces from Ukraine without conditions, and engage in genuine diplomacy." In February 2022, Russian President Putin put Russia's nuclear deterrent forces on high alert amid the sweeping sanctions the US and EU have imposed on it. Rogozin has previously said Roscosmos would leave the International Space Station and that the decision had already been affirmed. He also criticized the litany of Western economic sanctions imposed on Russia. He said, "I believe that the restoration of normal relations between partners in the International Space Station and other joint projects is possible only with the complete and unconditional lifting of illegal sanctions." Rogozin added in his Telegram message that the war, which Putin called a special military operation, had gone far beyond its original meaning and geography, and called it a war for the truth and the right of Russia to exist as a single and independent state. Nuclear capabilities abound in Europe, and nuclear intentions can be hard to decipher. On one side, Ukraine's attacker Russia has the largest stockpile of nuclear warheads in the world, including superiority in tactical nuclear weapons designed for battlefield use. On the other side, Ukraine's most powerful strategic partner, the United States, also has an extremely large and sophisticated nuclear stockpile. NATO partners France and the UK have their own advanced nuclear capabilities, and NATO-sharing states Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey host U.S. nuclear weapons on their territory. The risk of nuclear use stems from tensions escalating between Russia, the U.S., and NATO, even as the latter try to resist being drawn directly into the war. Although it is extremely unlikely the U.S. or its NATO allies would set out to conduct a nuclear strike against Russia, it is possible to imagine several scenarios that could lead them to become entangled in the conflict, leading to unintended nuclear escalation. The most serious danger is that of misperception. The risk that action taken by the US or NATO in support of Ukraine is misinterpreted by Russia as a deliberate strategic provocation. This is not a far-fetched scenario given Russia's nuclear posture, which maintains nuclear forces on high alert, and given the nuclear threats made by President Putin. It is obvious that Putin's nuclear signaling is designed to deter the U.S. and its allies from further intervention in Ukraine and economic measures that he may see as an existential threat. But escalation can also take on a momentum of its own. And because the margins are so thin, leaders have only a few minutes to make decisions if they believe their countries are under attack. The U.S. and its allies will have to tread extremely carefully in their response. But at least Russia could begin dispersing intercontinental ballistic missiles from their bases and fitting them to long-range heavy bombers, threatening the U.S. or move tactical warheads from their centralized storage facilities to their deployment location.